The main guy in the room. Right, okay. So, I'll do my little speech again. It's a real honour to welcome our keynote speaker, which should have been the end note speaker, but my ignorance, I've just found that out today. It's Keith Piper. Keith is one of the most influential British artists of his generation, a founder member of the Back Arts Group, whose work has fundamentally shaped how Black British history, identity, and power are understood within contemporary art. For over 4 decades, we're not calling him old.
You're calling me old. I think that is the definition of old.
The work shows for itself. His practice has challenged dominant narratives, confronted institutional silences, and insisted that Black presence in Britain is not marginal, recent, or optional, but central. Working across painting, installations, digital media, and archival practice, Keith's work has consistently been ahead of its time, asking questions that institutions are still catching up with. He has exhibited nationally and internationally, taught and mentored generations of artists, and continues to influence how we think about race, memory, technology, and representation today. We couldn't think of a more fitting endnote speaker for All Shades of Brown. So please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Keith Piper.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that, Adam. Welcome. Thank you so much for that introduction. And it's been a fantastic day. I mean, it's difficult because now it's 4 o'clock. It's the end of a very, very long day. And so I think the kind of last thing that you guys really want is a long, droning on presentation. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give a bit of a kind of presentation, but then I really want us to use this space for kind of what an end note is supposed to be, because there have been so many wonderful and rich things discussed that I think that it's always a nice moment to kind of bring it all together. And so therefore my presentation will be slightly less of a keynote, actually a lot less of a keynote, more of an end note. And then hopefully, I'm going to throw out some provocations, some deliberate provocations, and some deliberate elephants in the room. So please don't hate me, but they are very specifically to kind of, in a sense, challenge some of the things which have gone unspoken in some ways, and how we're going to rethink, how we're going to think our way through, because I think we are at a very specific kind of moment now. And I also want to apologize. I hate doing this. I always try and avoid it. But thank you so much for kind of taking the kind of risk of inviting me. In a sense, I also want to apologize because I had to kind of change the title of this thing, because I did see that the title was From the Margins to the Mainstream. Well, I'm not really of someone who's ever entered, I don't think, the mainstream. And so what I would like to kind of speak about is this process of going from margin to another margin, to another margin, to another margin. Always in that sense of being in particular places in relationship to the mainstream, which is kind of adjacent on the side. In a sense, that has been quite interesting over the last 40 years, because it means that you get different views. It's almost like, if you think about it, like a football pitch, and you're like walking around the touchline. You're getting different views of what's happening on the field, but you're never quite on the field yourself. I think that's actually quite a rich place. And so when we talk about the margins, I mean, for me, the term margin isn't necessarily a negative. I also want to talk about that in terms of the way in which we can use or we have used our spaces on the margin sometimes to actually speak in interesting ways and speak in interesting ways to other people in other parts of those margins, if that makes sense. So from the margin to the margin to the margin. I'm just going to go on quickly. How does this thing work? Which is the forward one? Just to introduce myself quickly, this is me. My name is Keith Piper. I really put the RBE behind my name. Now, as you know, one of the things which is interesting in the moment that we are living in is if I go into any room, any gathering of artists, especially black artists of my age, if I fling a stick, I'm going to hit people with MBEs, members of the British Empire, OBEs, officers of the British Empire, CBEs, commanders of the British Empire. I'm going to hit sirs now and dames. And so, in a sense, we're in a moment of visible arrival on many levels. And we do need to actually think about what that means to our conversations. That you have to look across. I don't have any of those things, by the way. And so the RBE is indicative of something different. The R, people have asked me what the R stands for. The R stands for refusal, reform, something else, because when I got the letter, I said, you have to change. There's a very important conversation about whether we can change the title of these things from whatever it is of the British Empire to something about, British excellence or some other kind of title. I think more and more of us have to make that stand and say, not gonna take it in that form. Obviously, me saying that is not going to have much influence because, lots of people have them already. But, we have to start thinking about the thing. I'm also an emeritus professor of fine art, which is also not as grand as it sounds, because emeritus just means old and retired. So you're no longer there. And I was only a professor for about 6 months anyway. So I'd been teaching for 20-odd years, if not more. Eventually got to a point where the institution where I was at, which was Middlesex University, said, okay, the amount of research that you've done, the work that you've done, we can give you a professorship. The very next week, it's like, oh, we are making people redundant. You look old and redundant. A bull. So therefore, it's about this moment, which is really brief. But I kind of quite like that title. But it means old. I'm also an artist, and unfortunately, I know you've kind of said this and this and this about practice. I'm not really going to speak about my own practice in this because it's really hard in this kind of context to know which parts of your practice to speak about. But what I am going to speak about is a kind of more generalized history. And a more generalized history going to an event, which is very much like this. Let me just go to the next one if I can. Which is very much like this event. And when I walked in here, I had this really fascinating and warm sense. Because this event where you have a conference, a coming together of artists, of practitioners, of people like us into a room, and there's a display of work, there are stalls, there are all those kind of things. And what I want to speak about is an event very similar to this, which happened in 1982. I'll go 40-odd years ago. The event was the first National Black Art Convention, and it will make sense as to why I'm going to talk about that at the end. However, what I want to show you just really quickly is a brief extract. It's a 7-minute extract, so please, it's not going to go on for too long. It's a 7-minute video extract from a video essay which I made in 2012. Now, in 2012, which was the 30th anniversary of this conference. We had a conference. We had formed something called the Black Art Group Research Project, which was a number of us from the Black Art Group. It's Claudette Johnson, Marlene Smith,